Hi, and welcome to this live reading of Night, Fire, Smoke, and Mirrors by C.L. Schneider, and this is hosted by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. There's no such thing as monsters. There's no such thing as monsters. With each silent affirmation, William bluntly ran faster. There's no such thing as monsters. Mom said. She promised, he thought, every night he was little, and he believed her. For 12 years, he believed her, until they moved here. Here in Sentinel City, monsters were everywhere. They skulked in the alleys and the school hallways, waiting to trip you. They lurked in the locker room to hide your clothes and waited in the cafeteria to steal your lunch. Sometimes they lingered outside the library to slash the tires on your bike. William tried not to look back. He didn't want to see their red eyes behind him glowing in the fading light. Halloween was still a week away. They were only wearing the masks to scare him. More than anything, William wished it wasn't working. Daring a glance, his eyes widened. The monsters were closing in, riding down the center of the dark street. He couldn't outrun them on foot, and they wouldn't give up. The four had set their sights on William his first day, calling him names, knocking his books off his desk. He hated it here. His stupid new school, his mom's stupid new job, his new home with the creaky old floors, 2 blocks from the murder house. She said, "Give it time," but it had been 3 weeks, and every day it got worse. "Billy, Billy," one of the boys hollered. "Where you going, Billy Butley?" Recognizing Gary's voice behind one of the masks, William glanced back again, shouting, "It's William, asshole! William Buntley!" "What did you call me?" Gary thundered. Another boy chimed in, laughing. "Hey guys, little Billy knows a curse word. Where'd you learn that, Butley? Babies don't know curse words." Exhausted, his legs trembling, William couldn't run any faster. He needed to get off the street somewhere their bikes couldn't follow. He needed a place to hide. Jumping a hedge, he pushed through the dripping bushes, crossed the shadowy backyard, and ran through another. Sliding on wet leaves, sinking in puddles up to his ankles, by the time William wound his way back out to the street, he was soaked. Storms had pounded the city for days. This afternoon, when the rain finally died into a fine mist, William had grabbed his bike and headed to the library. Many of the streets were still flooded. Limbs and power lines were down. He had to ride 4 blocks out of his way. But the library was the only sanctuary he'd found in this horrible place. It was worth getting wet for. William turned a corner into the cul-de-sac. Ahead, behind a white fence, was the house all the kids talked about. Legend said over the summer, a cult of devil worshippers killed the family that lived there, nailing their bodies to the floor in the shape of a pentagram. Sometimes, on a quiet night, you could hear them screaming. Everyone was afraid of the murder house. But William's greatest fear was behind him, not in front, even if the windows did stare back at him like wide, dark eyes. Out of breath, his stomach aching as he coughed on the chilly evening air, he eyed the house again. Chloe Tompkins said the killers were still there, hiding in the basement, with the demon they summoned the night the Chandler family died. Noah Bailey claimed his older brother knew someone who broke in to see if it was true and never came home. Lucia, who sat behind him in math, insisted the place was haunted by the little girl who'd lived there. The murder house was just one of the crazy stories William had heard. A kid in gym had a picture he claimed was of a mutant trashing his neighbor's car. Even his history teacher said the urban legends here were more than legends. William wasn't sure he believed it, but he did know one thing. No one would look for him in the murder house. Not even Gary. William pushed open the gate. It swung closed behind him, and he started up the walk. Halfway to the porch, he stopped, sucking in a gulp of air. No way. The front door was ajar. William stared at it, heart pounding. He looked back at the street. It was quiet. There was no sign of Gary and his friends. Maybe they were still looking, or they were trying to beat him home. Either way, he didn't have to go in. But if he did, if he survived the murder house, it would change everything. No one would tease him anymore. Bolting up the walkway, he took the steps 2 at a time and slipped inside. The dark was thick and quiet. The air was freezing, colder even than outside. It smelled. Ew. William covered his nose against the sour stench. Is this what murder smells like? Wanting light, he reached for his cell phone, but his pockets were empty. Panic swept a chill up his arms as William remembered where it was. Like always, he turned his phone off and put it away when he got to the library. The boys had been hiding across the street, waiting for him to come out and see his busted tires. When they started throwing rocks, he ran the other way, leaving his backpack with his phone inside on the ground beside his bike. He didn't like the dark, but William was more worried about proving he was here. If he couldn't take a picture, he'd have to take something else. A toy. A family photo. Putting a hand on the wall, he felt his way through the vacant house. William didn't believe there was a cult or a demon in that basement. It was far too quiet for that. But ghosts? William knew those were real. His mom hated when he said so, but he felt things. He always had. Like when his grandma came to visit from time to time. William never saw her. She passed away when he was 3. But he knew when she was there. He smelled chocolate chip cookies baking when the oven wasn't on. He sensed the warmth of her presence even though he hardly knew her before she died. And if he stood real still, William could feel her arms wrap around him in a hug. He'd sensed ghosts in other places too, but this house was different. Whatever was here, it wasn't interested in hugs. There were so many shadows, so many shapes he couldn't identify. A hint of light caught his eye. Hurrying toward it, William's gait slowed at the threshold of the living room. The odor was worse here, like something was rotting. This is where they died. He found the light. Street lamps were coming on outside. Their glow was leaking in through the blinds in the picture window. It was faint, but it softened the pinch in his stomach. Another light came on. Another glow. Better, he thought. If only he wasn't so wet and cold. Teeth chattering, barely able to work the zipper, William took off his coat to let it dry. His waterlogged shoes and socks came off next. As he dropped them to the floor, he noticed a shape in the center of the room. It was lumpy, like a pile of blankets. The hope of warmth coaxing him in, he wavered at the pattern of dark splotches on the carpet. William had never seen bloodstains before. Staring at the spots, one for the mother, one for the boy, and one for the little girl, William followed the curves, imagining them as dried puddles of spilled juice on the pale rug, his throat clogged. The house wasn't just scary, it was sad. There were other blacker stains on the floor and creeping up the walls. Noah said the bodies were burned, but William had seen scorch marks last year when a house caught fire in his neighborhood. They had no depth. These did. Uneven, thick, and jagged, they were shaped more like the molds and fungus they studied in science class. Still shivering, he eyed the lump in the center. It didn't look like blankets anymore. William glanced back into the hall. He wanted to leave. Screw Gary. This room felt like winter and smelled of month-old garbage, but if it wasn't blankets on the floor, what was it? Curiosity pulled him closer. The floor creaked beneath his bare feet. Boards groaned like a tired old man as William stepped around the wide patches of mold. There was more than he realized. Probably more than he could see with the heavy shadows still in the room. He jumped to a clean area. Landing, the carpet dipped under his weight as if the boards were soggy underneath. William teetered as he squatted beside his find. Gross, he whispered. It was a dead animal. Half of one, at least. The body lying on its side was the right size for a fox or a medium-sized dog, but it wasn't either. The long front legs were decayed down to bone. The chest and stomach were open and empty, with nothing inside but thick layers of the same black gunk layering the carpet. Something had stripped the hide and fur from the animal's head, exposing the wide skull underneath. The eye sockets were barely slits, sitting over a slender snout. Tusks curled off the ends. William had never seen anything like it. "Awesome," he muttered. Then with more worry, "What are you?" Black pieces of something were spinning over the back half. They shimmered a bit like glass, obscuring the weird animal's hind legs in shadow. The darkness was so thick it was like the limbs weren't even there, like they disappeared, like they were invisible. It can't be. William had read about things like the Dover Demon, Mothman, and Chupacabra. If the legends in Sentinel City were true, maybe he'd found something like that. But he didn't remember reading about any creatures that turned invisible. Extending a trembling hand over the body as he reached the dark, spinning objects, his hand passed through a breath of frigid air and vanished. William jerked back with an excited, "Whoa!" Enthralled, the pulse pounding in his ears, he thrust his hand in a second time. Extending it further, he felt around. His fingers brushed the animal's bony back legs. There was something under it, something that didn't feel like carpet. A sharp, icy tingle nipped at his hand. William pulled his arm back, and the breath dried in his throat. Even in the faint light, the black was visible on his fingers. The same moldy stuff on the carpet, and the creature's body was on him now. He tried to shake it off, but it was burning, crawling, spreading. Pain wormed in under his skin. Crying out, scrambling back, William lost balance and tumbled over into the coffee table. His head struck the edge. A crushing wave of hot pain rippled out, dulling the cold as he fell. Lying in the black, vision graying, his hand burning, the echo of a little girl's laughter zipped past William's ear. The rotting stench in the room waned, replaced by the sweet aroma of bubblegum. He breathed it in gratefully as he closed his eyes, cradled in the warmth of his own blood as it puddled out to join the stains on the carpet. Chapter 1. "Dahlia, this way!" Boots splashing ahead on the waterlogged street, my eager sidekick reached the head of the alley. Overshooting it, he turned back and skidded to a stop. The yellow of his flashlight disappeared as Casey Evans aimed the white beam into the darkened corridor. He took a step. "Don't even think about it." I shined my light over the rooftops. Making sure nothing was dropping down from above, I ran to catch up. Commercial buildings lined most of the block, but the streets were nearly deserted with the late hour and the aftermath of the most recent storm. Power was out all over the city. Roads were closed. Muck and debris were piled into corners and drains, swept in after days of overflowing sewers and flooded streets. The damp stench masked the scent of what else might be nearby, making tracking our prey difficult. I pushed my Lyrican senses out into the night, trying to confirm a location. Red braids whipping, I shook my head. "I'm not getting anything. Are you sure?" Evans gestured into the dark. "I'm sure. I saw her turn in here." I grabbed his arm and spun him around to face me. Whispering, hoping he might get the hint, I said, "Why the hell are you shouting?" Evans tapped the side of his head. "Industrial strength earplugs!" He pulled one out and shoved it in his pocket. "You told me to buy them, remember?" he said, his voice dropping. "I don't have super healing powers." A piercing wail blew through the passage. Crumbled papers and plastic cups tumbled out over the sidewalk, accompanied by the ripe odor of banshee. "Oh," Evans moaned, plugging his nose. "Why does it seem like our world is the only one to invent showers?" As the shrill sound faded, I studied the corridor. Even without shifting, my half-dragon eyesight was superior to humans. It lightened the shapes, telling me none of them were humanoid, and there were far more hiding places than I liked. The alley was wide, cluttered with parked cars and multiple dumpsters lining its length. I frowned at the opening on the other side. Wasn't this a dead end? Maybe at the turn of the century. Ow! He winced as I elbowed him in the ribs. There's a streetlight. Evans pointed to the end of the alley. An invisible patch of wet pavement glistening under a faraway glow. If she'd gone out, I would have seen her. What's here? Anything with customers? Evans slapped a hand on the wall of the brick building to his left. Gas station and repair garage stretches from this block to the next. Other side has some vacant stores, a hair salon, a laundromat, a shoe store, I think, and a bank. He squinted in thought. Anyway, at midnight on a Sunday, everything should be closed except the laundromat. Even in a hurricane, people need clean clothes. It wasn't a hurricane, I reminded him, rolling my eyes at the last in a long line of dramatic descriptors Evans had attached to the recent string of bad weather. It wasn't a typhoon or a storm of the century or an apocalyptic flood, bombogenesis, or a shark, whatever, he cut in. All I know is I was about a day away from building an ark, and that damn banshee wasn't coming on board. Good to know. Why don't you and your level head circle back around the block to the other end? If she gets by me, keep her contained. There's a reason she's here, on this block, in this alley. If we don't stop her from reaching that reason, she'll get stronger and faster, and catching her will get a lot harder than it already is.